And welcome back to the channel. If for the first time coming across my channel, please remember to subscribe. So today I want to bring you a small clip. Please stay with me. I want to bring you a small clip on American democracy, or maybe I should call it American hypocrisy. I will see. So let's listen, and then we come back and have a small discussion.
We didn't always agree, but I believe we shared some common values. A belief in defending democracy and human rights abroad, and honoring the Constitution at home. That's why I voted to confirm you. I believed you would stand up for those principles. You haven't. You've done the opposite. And you used to speak with conviction about the importance of foreign aid as a tool to advance American values and interests. Then you stood by while Elon Musk took a chainsaw to USAID and other assistance programs. That has left a staggering toll. Broken trust with countries, openings for China or adversaries, and countless preventable deaths of children and others. Take Sudan, for example. The freezing of U.S. humanitarian assistance forced the closure of nearly 80% of the emergency food kitchens there. 2 million famine-affected people were left without access to food. People died because of those actions. Mothers, fathers, and children. Tons of emergency food that could have saved their lives was left rotting in warehouses because you and Elon Musk refused to let USAID do its job. Sudan is a country where, by the administration's own determination, a genocide is unfolding in Darfur. But here's where it goes from cruel to despicable. While cutting off food aid to Sudanese families living through an actual genocide, you're fast-tracking white South Africans for refugee status under a manufactured claim that they are the victims of genocide.
Now I want you to listen to this part very carefully.
You tried to block the admission of individuals who had already been approved to come here as refugees while making bogus claims to justify granting such status to Afrikaners. You've made a mockery of our country's refugee process, turning it into a system of global apartheid, where political ideology and race, more than truth or need, matter. And while you've turned away from a genocide in Sudan and invented one in South Africa, you teamed up with President Trump to throw the Ukrainian people under the bus and have been played like a fiddle by Vladimir Putin. Of course, Donald Trump not only said he would end the war in Ukraine on day one, he also said he would end the war in Gaza on day one. And yet last week you were all running around to Gulf states, giving away very sensitive American AI and chips technology, but doing nothing to end the war in Gaza and get the remaining hostages returned. You know that for 78 days, the Netanyahu government did not allow a scrap of food to enter Gaza to reach over 2 million civilians. 57 children have died from malnutrition so far, and more than 14,000 children are in imminent danger of dying of starvation. As Cindy McCain said last week, and I quote, "Families in Gaza are starving while the food they need is sitting at the border." That is a gross violation of both U.S. and international law. What did you do? Nothing. Not once did you publicly call upon the Netanyahu government to end the blockade. Fortunately, other countries spoke out, and now we see a tiny trickle going in. Where have you focused your energy instead, Mr. Secretary? Well, your first trip as Secretary of State was to El Salvador, not to promote democracy, but to cozy up to President Bukele, who calls himself the world's coolest dictator. The result was a cash for collusion deal to deprive people living in America of their constitutional rights to due process. The Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, instructed you to facilitate the return to the United States of Abrego Garcia, who the administration admitted was wrongfully deported to El Salvador. Your response? You've openly flouted judicial orders. When asked whether you have been in touch with El Salvador to return Abrego Garcia, you boasted, quote, "I would never tell you that. And you know who else I would never tell? A judge." Clearly, you don't care about the Fifth Amendment right to due process, and you don't care about the First Amendment either, since you've been very busy snatching students off of college campuses for exercising their right to free speech. You dredged up a relic from the McCarthy era to claim that student protesters posed a threat to the foreign policy of the United States. Give me a break, Mr. Secretary. You know as well as I do this isn't about national security, it's about punishing free speech. And you know that in America, the government doesn't get to use its power to punish speech it doesn't like. Yet in March, you boasted about revoking student visas, saying, and I'm quoting, "We do it every day. Every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visa," unquote. Let's look at one of those lunatics, Mr. Secretary, Ms. Ozturk. Her crime was co-authoring an op-ed in her college paper critical of Tufts University's response to the war in Gaza. Your own department found zero links to terrorism, no anti-Semitic statements, but you still yanked her visa and shipped her off to detention in Louisiana. And the list goes on and on. The federal judge in the case of Mohsen Madawi, who was the Columbia student who was ambushed by federal agents at his citizenship appointment, said, and I quote, this is the judge, "Legal residents not charged with crimes or misconduct are being arrested and threatened with deportation for stating their views on the political issues of the day. Our nation has seen times like this before, especially during the Red Scare and Palm Parades. Like the McCarthy-era witch hunts of the 1950s, your campaign of fear and repression is eating away at foundational values of our democracy. Back then, it took one voice, Attorney Joseph Welch, to cut through the hysteria with the simple question that marked the beginning of the end of that shameful era. He asked Senator McCarthy, have you no sense of decency? And I would ask you the same, Secretary Rubio. You have shown through your words and your actions what the answer is. And I have to tell you directly and personally that I regret voting for you for Secretary of State.
I want to move to Ukraine because we heard the conversation that the president had with Vladimir Putin, the phone conversation where Putin didn't agree to any meaningful negotiation that would end this war in Ukraine. As President Trump has admitted, Vladimir Putin is taking him for a ride. Now, we have a bipartisan bill in the Senate that's led by Lindsey Graham. It has 80 sponsors. I understand that the House members are ready to take this up on a discharge petition if we pass it out of the Senate. How much longer until we rein Putin in? And are you prepared to support that?
I actually don't like the words you use. Maybe that's why Putin is not dealing with them. Because he knows that this is all a game. Why would you use a word like that? Rein Putin in. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but please choose your word wisely.
Sanctions bill that Graham and Blumenthal and 78 other members of the Senate support?
Well, let me answer your last question first, and that is about the bill. We obviously can't control what Congress does, and we've told the Russians this. Not now, 6-8 weeks ago. I believe, Senator Sheen, you were involved in a conversation that made it clear to the Russians what would happen if there was no progress made. And that's been repeated multiple times. I would also make this point, and it's important. Every single sanction, not one sanction has been lifted on the Russians. Every single sanction that was in place under the previous administration remains in place. So this idea we've given up leverage, well, the only leverage, we have the same leverage today we had under the previous administration.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I would argue that the leverage that we've given up is taking NATO membership off the table, taking away a commitment to continue to help the Ukrainians with intelligence sharing and with military equipment and arms that they need to help fight this war.
Well, that continues. There was a pause for 1 week. All of that was restarted.
That was intelligence sharing, though, but it doesn't cover the equipment and arms.
Oh, absolutely. That program has not been rescinded. They continue to receive arms.
And we continue to fund what the Ukrainians need as the president, and are you prepared to pass another supplemental bill to support them?
Well, that's a different decision. That's a different question. That's not up for me to decide. The White House would have to make a determination about whether to come to Congress for a supplemental. But everything that's been approved and congressionally appropriated is ongoing. In fact, to the extent that the Ukrainians have asked for anything additional, what they've asked for is air defenses, Patriot units, which frankly we don't have. But we are working closely with our NATO allies. There are NATO allies that do have some batteries of Patriot missiles that they could provide or transfer over to the Ukrainians to defend, for example, the airspace of Kyiv and other places. And we've been encouraging in that front and working alongside our partners there to get deliveries of some of these systems. As you can imagine, none of these countries want to give up their Patriot systems either. But we can't make them fast enough, and part of the challenge we have in Ukraine is that munitions are being expended substantially faster than the ability of the broader West, not just us, but the West, to produce them. Now, that said, on the issue of Ukraine, here's what we can all agree on. There is no military solution to this crisis.
Right.
It will have to end in a negotiated settlement. And the fundamental challenge we have in Ukraine is this. Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily. And that's been the crux of the challenge.
I don't disagree with that at one level, but on the other hand, what Vladimir Putin is doing now is playing for time, and he's playing this president like a fiddle. And the longer he plays it, the more opportunity he has to gain territory in Ukraine, and the harder it's going to be to get him to the table.
But
what we need to do is to put pressure on Vladimir Putin in every way we can to ensure that we can get them to the negotiating table.
Well, I disagree with this playing with a fiddle analogy, because the truth of the matter is when Vladimir Putin woke up this morning, he had the same set of sanctions on him that he's always had at the beginning of this conflict, and Ukraine was still getting armaments and shipments from us and from our allies, and the European Union is about to impose additional sanctions, and the U.S. is looking for no Patriot batteries to be able to transfer from other NATO nations into the Ukrainian hands. And what the president's trying to do is end a war. He's trying to end a bloody, costly war that neither side can win.
I think
people are dying every single day. But this notion that what has Putin gained throughout this? He hasn't gotten a single concession. He hasn't gotten a single sanction lifted.
And the more time he gets without additional pressure on Russia, the more incentive he's got to continue to gain territory and continue to play for time. But I want to just get to a final question because my time is running out. And that is, I recently wrote a letter to you about the issuance of executive orders on thousands of Afghan allies. These are people who fought alongside our military during the war in Afghanistan. They've been stranded in Qatar and Albania and Pakistan and Afghanistan. These are individuals who have been vetted already. They're ready to travel to the United States. And the question I have is this administration going to allow them to come to the United States as it promised? Because unless we're willing to keep our commitments to those people who were willing to fight and die alongside of us, then how can we ever ask people to do that again?
Yeah, a couple points. Some of those are I think the issues that is getting mixed up here is whether we are going to pay for them to fly to the United States once a visa is issued, or whether they have to find their own transportation to the U.S. So there's two separate topics: our payment to move people forward, but also the issuance of the visas. And when that is still going through an internal review as to who is going to be allowed in, there's been a review of the vetting process that's been used. Frankly, there have been some errors found in the previous vetting process that we're concerned about, and I'm separating out from that audience people who we have closely vetted because we've been working alongside them for many years with regards to their service alongside our intelligence forces or special operators on the ground from the broader. Remember, they're also bringing dependents with them. And so there were some concerns early on about freezing or slowing down this program until we could determine whether we were properly vetting people to come towards the United States. And that process is ongoing, and I think we'll have more concrete answers for you, which I know is not satisfactory at this moment, but we've obviously had a lot going on. But this is something that we've heard a lot from both our DoD partners and others in the intelligence community, and we're working to make progress on that.
I'm out of time, but just to clarify, on last week, Secretary Noem announced that temporary protected status, which I understand is not exactly the same, but for over 8,000 Afghans would end on July 12th. Many of those people are people, again, who fought and died alongside of our men and women in the military. And for us to send them back to sure death at the hands of the Taliban is just not what they were promised when they agreed to fight with us. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I wanted to talk to you about the president's personal business interests. During his first term, he made the decision to not enter into any new business deals during his presidency, that Trump-affiliated businesses would not enter into any foreign business arrangements. And that made sense because obviously it can be confusing for foreign governments to know how to try to win favor with the U.S. government if they have one route making concessions that are good for U.S. national security, and they also have another route, which is perhaps.
This is where I want to interject, where I would like to ask a question about corruption. Corruption and the definition of corruption and hypocrisy, and how some people push you into a corner to do certain things and things that they're not doing. I'll come back after the noise.
Helping the president's business interests.
Let's go.
The president obviously changed that policy, and in this administration, his business interests are announcing new agreements and new investments into those business interests by foreign governments. And I think it stands to reason that creates a real problem for foreign policy. It creates a problem for foreign governments in which they don't exactly know what the best way is to try to get on good terms with the U.S. government and with the White House. Is it to do what's right for American national security, or might it also be to do a business deal with the President of the United States or the entities that he controls? Just to clarify, when the President's businesses are engaged in negotiating.
Before we go any further, I'm going to bring you a video on that. Actually, I'll bring you a video on that tomorrow, on the 10 big business deals that the President of the United States make. 10 big business deals. So stay tuned for that tomorrow.
For instance, with the UAE on their stablecoin business. There was this big investment announced recently. You are not part of those negotiations. Those are being done by the president's family or those representing the president's business.
I'm not aware the president's involved in managing any business. He's other than the presidency of the United States. His family is allowed to make business deals. They continue to operate the enterprises that his family ran. I also don't accept the notion that these deals, for example, in Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Qatar, had anything to do with the president. For example, the Qatar bought $200 billion worth of airplanes from Boeing. The president's not, as far as I know, not a shareholder, certainly doesn't own Boeing. So the overwhelming, if you look at the deals that were structured, they were involved in investments in the United States. That's the deals he signed, and or investments in, for example, the UAE or Saudi Arabia involving artificial intelligence.
UAE did announce a massive investment in World Liberty Financial, and World Liberty Financial is controlled by the president. And the president does actively engage in these businesses. He uses his social media to market the businesses that are being run by his family. I mean, just go onto his social media feed and you will see him marketing his meme coins. So that is the president of the United States. That is not his son's doing.
But that, just to be clear, that was not part of this. That was not an announcement as part of this trade visit that was conducted into the Middle East.
Well, whether or not it was made during the time the president was there are obviously business deals being done between Trump entities and these countries. Let me ask you about the one that is probably most confusing to this committee, which is the planned gift of a plane to either the United States government or the president. Is it your understanding that this luxury plane that Qatar has offered the president, and the president has announced he is willing to accept, is a gift to the United States government? Or is it a gift ultimately to the president himself that he can use in his library?
Well, you'd have to talk to the Department of Defense, because this is a replacement or at least a temporary bridge plane for Air Force One, the new Air Force One, which is way off its delivery schedule. And so that would have to be with the Air Force. They operate Air Force One. My understanding of it basically has been from the very beginning that this is a plane that was identified after talking to Boeing about what other planes around the world would fit the bill that are out there that could be used now. They identified the ones that Qataris had as an opportunity for one, and as a result, or the UAE had as opportunity for one, and that's how that.
And it's not your understanding that the plane ultimately will belong to the president or to the president's library after?
Well, I'm not involved at that level of it. I've never heard that before. What I've heard is that plane will replace Air Force One, which is an Air Force plane.
Let me ask you about the dinner that's happening this Thursday night. The president has offered access to him to the 200 top.
I hope you don't mind me not interpreting or interjecting, because I believe these things need to be heard. So I don't think I'm going to stop the video. I think I'm just going to sit here and watch with you.
Purchasers of his meme coin Reports are that maybe about half or more of those individuals who will be meeting with him, many in a VIP reception, are foreigners. Do you have a list of those foreign individuals who will be meeting with the president?
I don't. I don't know anything about it. I didn't even know there was a dinner on Thursday night, so I'm not sure what you're referring to.
So you don't know whether any of the foreign individuals who are going to be meeting with the president this Thursday night, for instance, are on our list of sanctioned individuals, or whether any of those individuals have connections to, let's say, terrorist organizations abroad?
Well, I think if they had terrorist links, the Department of Homeland Security probably would not have allowed them into the country. But I don't even know there is a dinner out there. You're asking me about something I don't know about.
Well, but listen, this is a dinner that the president is having. It is likely.
Well, truly, really and truly, I don't believe him that he don't know. But who am I to say that he's telling not the truth?
Going to involve some very significant foreign interests. You have to be pretty wealthy in order to be able to get inside this dinner. Isn't that a relevant question for the Secretary of State?
Yeah, I'm not the social
Which foreign
secretary.
interests are going to be speaking to the president? I mean, it's kind of naive to believe that they aren't going to be in that room talking about national security matters.
Well, I don't think that that's the case at all, because I would be aware if it was the case. The truth of the matter is I interact with government officials and others and governments of other countries. That's what I don't say. You're asking me about a dinner I don't know anything about. I can't answer you because I don't know anything about this dinner. It's the first I heard of it. Like I said, I don't keep the president's social schedule. It's not on my phone. It's not in my pocket. I don't even know. I can't comment on a dinner I know nothing about.
Yeah, I think that represents a real problem for this committee, because there is clearly a way around the State Department for foreign individuals of significant influence and wealth to be able to directly lobby the president of the United States.
But I don't think
your
that's
answer
fair.
is that you don't know this is happening.
Well, I don't know that there's
that
a dinner.
in of itself is.
I don't know that there's a dinner, and I don't know what the guest list is, but I can tell you I've run into the president of FIFA from the World Cup. He's here all the time. I see him. He's a private individual. It's not a government entity, and he's met with the president and is friendly with the president. He doesn't have to go through me to meet with the president. The president has relationships and friends and people he's known for a long time. Some of them are foreigners. That's not unusual.
Yeah,
but you're asking me about a specific dinner and implying nefarious impact. I can't comment on a
meeting with the president. I think you should probably endeavor to get your hands on the list to make sure that there aren't individuals there who are perhaps contravening national security interests that the
I don't think
Department of
I don't
State
have any
is
concern about that. Ultimately, I don't have any concern that the president having dinner with someone is going to contravene the national security of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you about the program. It's the United States Refugee Assistance
So stay with me. Please, listen to this one.
Program. And this is a program that state is the manager of, together with...
Please remember to subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be bringing a few more videos like this in the near future.
Other cabinet secretariats, DHS.
The reason I said that is I think the type of video is very informative and things that we should know about. I'm one of those people that we only see what the media say on the TV, but we haven't heard the questions asked by these senators. So I will go and look for these videos and I'll bring them here. So please, let's watch this to the end.
Secretariats, DHS and HHS. State plays the lead management role, and it is how to manage the U.S. refugee assistance programs in tandem with contractors who help the United States on that. By an executive order on the first day of his presidency, President Trump paused all refugee programs and has canceled contracts to the agencies like the U.S. Catholic Church or Lutheran Refugee Services or HIAS or Church World Services who've been resettling refugees. Those programs are paused. There's litigation about it, but as far as I know, the United States is not, or the administration has not withdrawn the executive order. So there's essentially, from this administration, no refugee programs for anyone except. In early February, the president announced a special refugee program for Afrikaner farmers, justified A, by some concerns about South African foreign policy, but B, a claim that these were persecuted individuals. So right now, the U.S. refugee program allows a special program for Afrikaner farmers, the first group of whom arrived at Dulles Airport in Virginia not long ago, while shutting off the refugee program for everyone else. Do you think Afrikaner farmers are the most persecuted group in the world?
I think those 49 people that came certainly felt they were persecuted, and they passed every sort of check mark that had to be checked off in terms of meeting the requirements for that. They live in a country where farms are taken and land is taken on a racial basis.
Okay. Do you think they're more persecuted than Uyghurs or Rohingyas, or more persecuted than political dissidents in Cuba or Venezuela or Nicaragua, or more persecuted than those who would be threatened should they be returned to Afghanistan by violence by the Taliban?
Well, the problem we face there is the volume problem, okay? If you look at all the persecuted people of the world, it's millions of people. They can't all come here. And we had refugee programs.
So
that were
why,
acting
so
as a
why,
magnet for
why
people to come here.
prioritize Afrikaner farmers?
Well, because it's a small subset, it's a new issue, and the president identified it as a problem and wanted to use it as an example. But that's different from having these refugee programs that were basically spending money to put people up in communities and accommodate them, and it was acting as a magnet. Millions of people entered the country illegally, and today the border is sealed.
Let me challenge you, and I'm just going to say for the public, if you want to understand about the, quote, persecution of Afrikaner farmers, go look at the composition of the South African government. Since July of 2024, there's a government of national unity, and the opposition party to the ANC, the Afrikaner Party, the Democracy Alliance, is part of the governing coalition. They joined the governing coalition a year ago, and the leader of that party was given the remit of Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen. He is the leader of the former Afrikaner Party, still widely representing Afrikaners. He is the Minister of Agriculture in South Africa right now. I assert that this claim that there's persecution of Afrikaner farmers is completely specious. Are you aware ever during the apartheid era in South Africa did the United States establish a special program to allow South African blacks who were treated as second-class citizens in the apartheid program, a special program so they could claim refugee status in the United States?
I thought this is a very, very good question. So let's hear the answer.
Because I was probably in 9th grade or 8th grade at the time.
Yeah, well, then I don't expect you to know. I'll just tell you, never has there been a special program for Africans to come in as refugees to the United States. We've allowed special programs for people being persecuted for their religion, Soviet-era Jews. We've allowed special programs for people fleeing from communism, Cuba, Vietnam, the Soviet Union. We've never allowed a special program to allow Africans into the United States in an expedited refugee status until now. Afrikaner farmers living in a nation governed by a government of national unity that includes the main Afrikaner Party. And actually an even more right-wing Afrikaner Party is also included in the coalition government. Now, would you agree with me, Mr. Secretary, that if we're interpreting the statutory phrase, a well-justified fear of persecution, we should try to do that in an even-handed way?
To the team, people are not subscribed. Please subscribe.